What's up everybody, this is Alex with Comic Book Historians. Go ahead and click on that juicy red subscribe button down below. Now, in my 20th century formative graphic novel video, there is one that I neglected to mention in between the 1956 EC Picto Fiction series and the 1968 graphic novel by Gil Kane, His Name is Savage. And that would be the 1966 Dracula graphic novel that was put out by Ballantine Books by Russ Jones Productions, which was recently recompiled and re-edited with a new foreword by Vanguard Publications, available at Vanguard as well as budsartbooks.com. The illustrations are by Alden McWilliams with script adapted by Otto Binder and Craig Tennis from the original 1897 novel by Bram Stoker. In fact, the cover is likely also painted by Russ Jones, who was Creepy Magazine's founding editor and head of the production company that made this graphic novel. Now, Alden McWilliams started work in comics in the mid-1930s and worked prolifically for multiple comic publications like Quality Comics and Archie Comics, as well as comic strips like Dateline Danger. He also did some 1965 work on Creepy Magazine before illustrating Dracula. Now, Otto Binder is a celebrated science fiction writer responsible for 1939's I, Robot for Amazing Stories magazine, as well as prolific work of the 1940s Captain Marvel Shazam comic book, as well as expanding the Superman mythos in the 1950s and 1960s. In the later 1960s, Otto Binder was still very much working for various comic books or novels because he had lost a lot of money in the early 60s when he was editing Space World magazine. Craig Tennis, who is probably an assistant to Binder on the project, is famous for classics such as Johnny Tonight and The Runner's Handbook.
Crap.
Now, Russ Jones originally created Creepy Magazine for James Warren Publications around 1963 toward 1964, which was largely funded by profits from Warren's previous publication, Famous Monsters of Filmland by Forey Ackerman. Now, remember that Forey Ackerman was also a science fiction and horror buff and a co-writer of the Science Fiction Digest fanzine that he also did with Mort Weisinger and Julia Schwartz. Now, Russ Jones is a penciler, inker, novelist, and editor who had all the required skills needed to package a magazine or a book, which came in handy when he came up with an idea of a black and white approach to magazines that was very much like the EC Comics horror stories of the early 1950s, but was still able to avoid comic book censors.
Lover, come back to me.
Jones left Creepy Magazine in 1965 and started his own Russ Jones Productions and assembled two books of note during this period. Dracula in 1966, in which he arranged a foreword by popular horror British actor Christopher Lee, and Christopher Lee's Treasure of Terror in the same year for Pyramid Books. I assume an arrangement was made between the two men because these two books came out around the same time. The 1966 graphic novel Dracula adaptation strongly favors the appearance of Christopher Lee as Dracula, and the layouts and script are apt, to the point, and clear to both understand and enjoy. The imagery matches perfectly with the tone and pacing of the script, in which a reader can sense Binder's immense experience here. Award-winning comics historian, publisher, and editor of Vanguard Publications, J. David Spurlock, adds in scenes from outside material like Dracula Lives magazine from the early 1970s, sporting art by Neil Adams to further enrich the background of the graphic novel. There's also Dracula concept art by Jim Steranko for the 1992 Francis Ford Coppola film that enhances the reader's experience. Reading further into the story, the isolation of Jonathan Harker in Dracula's castle is visually and verbally told with cold, absolute precision.
Bloody wolves chasing me through some blue inferno.
And Dracula's eventual travel to London well captures the desolation and despair that accompanies the titular character. As vampire bites appear on local women's necks, the reader is taken into adventure of light versus darkness in the 1800s. Now, it's not easy to find an original version of the 1966 graphic novel, and even though Manor Books republished the story in 1975, copies are generally found in disrepair. The new Vanguard compilation of this work is the best publication to date of this material because it has superior paper quality, great Frank Frazetta cover, as well as an awesome foreword by historian J. David Spurlock. His overview of the history of Vlad Tepes, Bram Stoker, the vampire myth, and Dracula in film and comics makes for an informative and entertaining read. And the horizontal approach makes it far more readable than the vertical approach that was taken by the former two versions. This graphic novel holds a firm place in the 20th century graphic novel and sequential storytelling experience.